in the midst of the calm and gold desert, where the winds whisper ancient secrets, and the heavens embrace the earth in shades of purple. At dusk, a lonely tree was lifted. His roots touched the depths of time, and his branches seemed to reach his own heaven. This was not an ordinary tree. It was the sacred tree, wrapped in a mystery that crossed generations, legends, and scriptures. Its leaves shone with a soft light, as if each kept a divine story, a fragment of the Creator's wisdom. They said that anyone who approached her with a pure heart could hear the whisper of the presence of God, as if eternity itself spoke through the wind between its branches. That tree was a symbol of hope, renewal, and deep connection with the heavenly light that guides us even on the darkest nights of the soul. As we walked together for this journey of light and wisdom, let's explore the mysteries of this tree, not in a hurry, but with an open heart. With each step, with each word, we will let the serenity of the Holy Spirit pack our thoughts, dissolving anxieties, fears, and doubts. Take a deep breath, deliver your thoughts to God, and allow your peace to guide your dreams. In the beginning, when the earth was still young and the sky touched creation with its fresh and silent light, God planted a garden in Eden to the east. There, between rivers of pure waters and green plains, he placed the man, Adam, and the woman, Eve, to take care of what had been formed with so much love. In the middle of that garden, among 1,000 aromas of flowers and fruits, between the soft breeze that carried the breath of the Most High, there were two distinct trees, the tree of life, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But elsewhere, a little farther in time and space, there was a third tree that does not appear prominent in the scriptures, but which was known to the few and revered by many, the sacred tree. Unlike the others, this tree was not a symbol of prohibition or fall, but of revelation. They said that she flourished in specific times, moments of great change, when the voice of God needed to be heard more clearly in the hearts of the righteous. The story you will hear now is a spiritual reinterpretation of ancient traditions, fueled by the breath of the Spirit and watered with the hope of those seeking rest in the presence of the Eternal. Imagine the scenario now, a vast field, far from any city, where the sounds of the modern world do not exist, only nature in its silent praise. The sky dyed with golden tones at dusk, and there, in the center of everything, a lonely but imposing tree, lifting with elegance over the sacred earth. That tree seemed to contain the memory of the world. His trunk was wide, his deep roots. Each leaf was like a silent prayer, shaking slightly with the soft breeze, as if the angels themselves played it. Around it, the floor was dry, but the tree never wilted. She flourished, even when the desert threatened to swallow everything. It was there that many old travelers came in search of answers, comfort, and wisdom. It is said that the prophet Eliab, man of few words and many silences, was once guided by the Lord to this place. He did not know the way, but his soul felt the call. It was as if a soft, imperceptible melody to the ordinary ears guided his steps through mountains, valleys, and dry streams. On the way he prayed. He asked for discernment, for he lived in times of darkness and doubt, when men moved away from the commandments of the Most High and sought their own truth. Eliab did not seek glory or power. He just wanted to understand the heart of God, and it was this pure desire that took him, on a starry night, to the foot of a forgotten hill. When he reached the top, he saw it, the sacred tree, illumined by the moonlight. It seemed to shine from the inside out, as if the divine flame itself carried. Eliab fell to his knees, not out of fear, but for reverence. He felt that there, in that place, the heaven touched the earth. Approaching, she felt a kind warm, like a mother's touch, on her son's face. It was not a scorching, but engaging heat, a heat that spoke of presence, care, divine proximity. And then he heard, not a resounding voice, but a whisper, like the wind that passes through the leaves, like the murmur of a distant stream. "Listen, my son, for I am with you." It was then that the tree began to release a delicate fragrance, such as myrrh and sandalwood, mixed with the perfume of the wet earth, After the rain, Eliabi took a deep breath and felt his soul rest. The concerns that accompanied him days ago, perhaps years, began to dissolve. The weight on the shoulders gave in. The tension in the hands disappeared. He sat in the shadow of the tree and remained silent, just listening. What did he hear? Words that do not pronounce themselves with the mouth, but which are understood with the spirit. Phrases that do not make noise, but that echo forever in the soul. "Trust me," said the wind. "I am your rock, your fortress. When all the paths look dark, remember, there is always light where my name is invoked." There, on that first night, Eliabi didn't sleep, but neither did he feel tired. It was as if in a state between the world and the sky, a place where time does not hurry, where concerns have no space. And he understood. The sacred tree was not just a plant. It was a symbol, a portal, a meeting point between thirsty humanity and the God who quenches. The next day, when the sun was born, its rays seemed to play between the tree branches. The leaves reflected the light as small mirrors of the sky, and Eliabi cried, not for sadness, but for gratitude. He knew he would not leave the same man. God had spoken to him, and that was enough. Over time, Eliabi wrote about her experience in scrolls that would later be kept silent by those who understood the value of the sacred. They were not teachings for everyone. They were revelations for those who approached humility and sincere desire. The sacred tree remained there as a silent headlight. Some said it disappeared and appeared in different places, always guiding those who were thirsty for something deeper than the world can offer. Today, you and I are here, connected not by distances, but by purpose. You may be tired. Maybe your heart is heavy. You may be looking for answers, as Eliabi was one day. And that's why this story needs to be told, not just to be heard, but to be felt. She is an invitation, a call, a reminder that even on darker nights there is a light. And this light has deep roots, wide branches, and welcoming shadow. As we rest under this symbolic shadow, we can reflect. What tree is this in my life? Where is my hope planted? What holds me when everything seems dry around? The answer may not come with words, but it will come with peace. And this peace is the language of God. Now breathe slowly. Let the scenario form before your closed eyes. The wind touches your face. The earth under your feet is firm. And in front of him, the sacred tree shakes gently as one sings an old song, only heard by attentive hearts. You are in a safe place. Here, there is wisdom. Here, there is light. After that transforming encounter, Eliabi understood that her mission was not to keep for himself the mystery of the sacred tree, but to walk with the wisdom that had sprouted from her in her soul, allowing each step of her to be a reflection of the light that had touched him on that holy night. He came down from the hill in silence, and the days that followed were of recollection. The world around it had not changed. The difficulties still existed. Conflict still filled human hearts. But inside it, everything had been renewed. He no longer reacted with fear, nor was he consumed by uncertainties. It was like someone who carries a secret of peace inwards, and comes to see everything with milder eyes. It was not long before the people around them realized the change. In his village, known for his simplicity and work, with the cultivation of dates and the creation of sheep, Eliabi was a respected man, but until then, seen as reserved and distant. Now his presence conveyed something different, a serenity that was not explained with words, but calmed even the most restless. One day, a young man named Lemuel approached Eliabi to see him sitting under an olive tree in silence. Lemuel was the son of a potter and lived distressed by the responsibilities that seemed to crush him. His father was sick, the family's business went wrong, and he was consumed by a constant fear of failing. He approached, sat next to the prophet, and, with his voice embargoed, asked, "Master, how to find peace when everything around seems to crumble?" Eliabi remained silent for a moment, contemplating the sky. Then he answered in a low and paused voice, "When I walked to the sacred tree, I found no answers ready. I did not receive a detailed plan to solve every difficulty of life. But I found something that is worth more than any immediate solution. Trust. Lemuel frowned, as who does not understand. Trust. In whom? In God. El Arabi answered, firmly serene. Confidence in which he is in control, even when everything seems disordered. Faith that even in the desert there is a hidden source of water. Even in the darkness, there is a light that still shines, even though human eyes do not realize it. The young man silenced, and there, in that brief conversation, he began to understand that the true faith does not require circumstances to change for peace. It blooms, like the sacred tree, even when the surrounding floor looks dry and infertile. Eliabe was sought by many, not for your teachings, but for your presence. He was not a man of speech, but his listening was deep. When he spoke, he used soft parables, inspired by the experiences lived at the foot of the tree. In one of his reflections, he once said, "Faith is like a seed planted in the heart. It does not require noise to grow, only silence, beware, and the light of heaven." People began to gather around them not to seek spectacular miracles, but to learn to perceive the miracles that were already present in everyday life, at the birth of a child, in the rain that falls on the dry land, in the reconciliation of two injured hearts. But not everyone understood. There were those who accused him of mysticism, heresy, of creating a doctrine outside the scriptures. And although Eliabe did not want conflict, he knew that not every spirit accepts light easily. Faith, for many, was still conditioned to vision, the immediate result. And that was saddened him. In a silent dawn, he prayed alone at the top of a small hill. The wind blew slowly, and the stars seemed to hear his soul. He said to God, "Sir, I don't want to be confused. I don't want to lose myself in excessive zeal. Guide me so that I will walk only for your spirit, not vanity." That same night, in a dream, Eliabe had a vision. The sacred tree appeared before him again, but now his leaves were falling, one by one, until only the trunk was left. He felt a tightness in his chest, like who loses something precious. But then, from the soil around the tree, small, green, and fragile branches began to sprout, which soon turned into new trees, forming a woods. He understood the truth is not maintained by the force of one tree, but spreads when it is lived and sown. He woke up with tears in his eyes. That was an answer. His mission was not to protect the tree as a lone guardian, but inspire others to become vivid trees of faith, hope, and light. Thus Eliabe began to teach in the form of meditations. With each meeting he chose a verse and meditated him in depth. One of the favorites was 91 Psalm, verse 1. "He who dwells in the hideout of the Most High, in the shadow of the Omnipotent, will rest." He explained, resting in the shadow of God is like lying in the shadow of the sacred tree. It is knowing that there is a greater presence that protects us, sustains us, and that no storm can tear what was rooted by the Lord himself. The children liked to hear him tell about the angels around the tree. He said, "They have no gold wings or flaming swords, but they are there, like soft breeches, like light between the leaves, like silent songs, and they keep those who choose to trust." Time has passed. Eliabe aged, and his beard became white, like Hermon's snow, but his faith remained young. He no longer saw the tree with his physical eyes, but felt it alive in his heart. And whenever someone asked if she still existed, he smiled and said, "The tree is where silence, humility, and thirst for God is. Where these things live, there is the sacred tree." Faith, for him, has never been a lack of fear, but daily decision to trust, even with fear, to follow, even without seeing, to stay, even when everything shouts to give up. One night, already very elderly, was seen sitting under the starry sky, looking at the horizon. A young apprentice asked, "Master, do you still look for the tree?" He answered with a smile, "Now, I know she's in me, and as long as there is someone willing to hear, willing to love, willing to trust, it will continue to flourish," and closed his eyes with peace of mind. What teaches us this part of the story? Faith that springs from the experience with the sacred need no fanfare. It is silent, but firm. It does not exempt us from pain, but sustains us in it. True faith is not the result of absolute certainties, but a daily, constant delivery that says, even if I do not understand, I will trust. Although I cry, I will wait. Although I fear, I will walk. You may be now at this exact point, wishing to trust, but with a tired heart, and it's okay. God does not require constant strength, only sincerity. It does not expect perfection, but disposition. Breathe. Feel the air entering your lungs as a gift. Imagine, in your mind, the sacred tree. See there, in your shadow. Listen to the soft wind. Listen to the divine whisper, I'm with you. Over time, the story of Eliab and the sacred tree began to spread like the wind that runs the valleys. Not noisy, like a proclamation in the squares, but in a subtle way, mouth to mouth, heart to heart. Those who heard his words and lived his meditations became as silent rivers that brought water to other thirsty souls. There was something special in the way Eliab taught. He never demanded, never imposed. His words came like who offers bread to the hungry or shadow to the tired. He knew that the human soul is delicate land, and that the seed of faith only blooms when thrown with meekness and watered with patience. Among his disciples was a woman named Naomi, widow from a young age. He knew the deep pain of loss, and for a long time his soul has been mourning. The countenance was always closed, the dry eyes of crying so much. But on an autumn afternoon, he sat in silence at Eliab's meetings. He said nothing, just heard. That afternoon, Eliab talked about fear, said, fear, when it grows without measure, becomes a prison without grids. He keeps us from seeing what is beyond. But God did not create us to live captives to fear. He is our refuge and fortress, a help well present in the anguish. Then he took a long break and added, there is a tree inside you, Naomi. She is still alive, just waiting for the right light. These words crossed their defenses as the sun crosses dense clouds. She cried. No tears of despair, but of liberation. Something broke, or maybe something finally started to flourish. From that day, Naomi returned, and with each new meditation, a part of his soul seemed to return to light. In the third meeting, Eliab told a new vision he had had in a dream. I saw an arid plain, cracked by the sun. No plants, no shadow. But under the earth, deep roots moved. They intertwined, seeking a source of secret water. And when they touched this source, the ground began to sprout trees, one after the other. And I heard a voice that said, my promises don't die. They just wait for the time to flourish. This view echoed in the hearts of many, especially those who were waiting for answers a long time ago. Faith have learned from Eliab. It is not measured in immediate results. She is an active, silent, entrusted wait, like the roots that grow in secret. Naomi began to help other women in the village. He carried food, took care of the sick, taught old songs about God's faithfulness. It was no longer the same. And when asked what had changed, she responded sweetly, I sat in the shadow of the tree, and there, my soul rested. But not all the paths were easy. One of the disciples, named Azarel, young and impulsive, sought visible signs. I wanted miracles. I wanted supernatural manifestations, like those of the ancient prophets. Said if the tree is so sacred, why don't we see it with our eyes? Why don't we hear the voice of God as Eliab heard? Eliab, calmly, he replied, Azarel, there are many who see and do not believe, and there are many who believe without seeing. What transforms the heart is not the vision, but the surrender. But Azarel insisted. Its thirst was intense, but disorderly. He left in search of the physical tree, walking through the deserts, climbing mountains, crossing valleys. He returned months later, tired, thin, and empty. I had found many trees, but none spoke, none shone, none played him as he expected. It was then that, exhausted, he knelt at Eliab's feet and said, now I understand. The tree is not in a place. It is in a posture. The posture of those who surrender, who trusts, who accepts that faith is more than what can be touched. Eliabe, with teary eyes, put his hand over his head and said, "Now Azarel, you started to see. Many years have passed. Eliabe aged even more. I no longer walked with the same agility." His words became more paused, but carried an even more intense force. "Once," he said, "confidence in God is the foundation of everything. The world changes, winds blow, human certainties fall apart. But whoever anchors in the Lord remains firm, as a tree planted by riberos." He always repeated the verse of Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 7 and 8. "Blessed is the man who trusts the Lord, and whose confidence is the Lord. For it will be like the tree planted by the waters, who extends his roots to the ribero, and does not fear when the heat comes, but his leaf turns green, and in the year of sequidentia does not stifle or fail to bear fruit." These words were like a hymn for those who had been touched by their journey, and everyone knew that the sacred tree had become much more than an external symbol. It was an internal reality. Eliabe has prepared his last days, as who prepares a land to be sown. He began to teach his disciples to hear more than they speak, to observe more than judge, to trust more than they demand. His last public meditation was brief. He looked at the sky and said, "If there is one thing I learned, is that God does not ask us to hurry, but deliver. It does not charge us results, but fidelity. The sacred tree is where there is a heart willing to wait for it," and then smiled. His face, aged by time, radiated an indescribable peace. That night, while the full moon illuminated the fields, Eliabe lay down and slept, not like who runs away, but as who concludes a mission. His last sigh was serene, like the wind that packs the leaves of a tree in silence. The next morning, the disciples gathered. There was sadness, yes, but there was also a strange and deep joy. They knew that the Master had left in peace, and they also knew that his legacy would not be lost. Naomi began to lead the meetings. Azarel became a wise and patient man, and many others, inspired by Eliabe's life, decided to live more calmly, more faith, more presence. They no longer sought the sacred tree as a distant object, but as an inner truth. Eliabe's journey invites us to reflect. Where is our faith? Are we running after miracles? Or are we surrendering to the miracle that is the constant presence of God? Are we demanding signs? Or learning to recognize sacred silence? Are we waiting for the world to change to have peace? Or letting the peace of Christ change our inner world? The tree remains alive. It blooms in every heart that chooses to trust. Its roots deep in the Word. Your branches extend in prayer. Your leaves are healing. Its fruit is peace. Now close your eyes for a moment. Breathe slowly. Imagine yourself in that sacred field. See the orange sky at dusk. Feel the earth firm under your feet. And in front of you, see the tree. She is there, firm, serene, shining with a light that doesn't come from the sun, but from the top. Approach. Sit down to your shadow. Listen. There is a whisper, a presence, an invitation, and in this place of rest, God speaks to his heart. Do not fear. I am with you. The years followed their course as silent rivers shaping the margins of time. Eliabe's story became a seed in many hearts. But like every living seed, it has not remained static, germinated, grew up, and flourished in the most unexpected places. Eliabe's disciples formed a small community, not an isolated group of the world, but a spiritual family, united by the desire to live with lightness, faith, and purpose. They gathered at the afternoon, when the sky painted his last colors, and the wind passed between the houses, like a whispered psalm. There was no stone temple, no high pulpit, only the beaten floor, some stones like seat, and attentive hearts. In that simple space, words of life sprang. Each meeting was started with a silent prayer, followed by a reading of the writings left by Eliabe, small handwritten fragments that brought meditations about faith, surrender, and wisdom. One of the most read writings said, "Wisdom does not scream, she whispers. She is on the righteous ride, in the soft answer, in tears prayer when no one sees. She does not dress in pride, but of meekness." and the one who seeks her with sincerity, even silent, will find her. These words have become motto for many. Azrael, before fiery, now led the moments of reflection with serenity. It was as if time beside Allah Bay had thinned his edges, like the river that softens the stones along the way. He taught with love and truth, always recalling what changes a man is not the strength he imposes, but the presence he carries. One night an elderly woman named Hadassah sought Azrael. His eyes were mirrors of a long life, marked by loss and overcoming. She had heard of the tree and Elia Bay, but had never been present in the meetings. When he sat next to him, he said, "I always believed in God, but I never understood how to trust fully. I was always afraid to drop the control." Azrael listened carefully and replied, "It's natural. Trusting is how to throw yourself in a river and believe that he knows where he goes. But God does not require us to launch with our eyes closed. He walks with us to the edge of the bank, and when we jump, he is there in the waters to support us." Hadassah smiled for the first time in many years. It was as if he found relief in a simple truth. At the end of that meeting, she said softly, "Today, for the first time, I felt the shadow of the tree over me, and that was enough." The tree had become a symbol of an inner truth, and each one who discovered it carried a fragment of its shadow. Wherever he had listening, surrender and faith, there was manifesting. Naomi, now more mature and spiritually strengthened, began to record in papyrus the stories he heard and lived. In one of them, he wrote, "The tree does not move in space. It reveals itself at the right time to those who seek it with real thirst. It's not blind brightness, but console. Its fruit is not for those who require, but for those who expect." These registered, delicately kept, passed from generation to generation as an invisible heritage that fed the souls. Among the new generations was a boy named Aliyah, born many years after Eliabe's departure had grown, listening to the stories around the fire. He had a close eye and sensitive heart. It was common to find him sitting in the shadow of the village trees, drawing with a twig on earth and humming old songs. One day, while walking alone on a field trail, something called him. It was not a sound. It was a feeling, like a heat in the chest, a memory he didn't have, but it looked like him. He followed the instinct and came to a clearing where there was a single tree, simple, common to the eyes. But to Aliyah, she looked different. He sat under his branches and closed his eyes. He felt a peace he had never felt before. It was not a special tree in the eyes of the world, but it was sacred to him at that moment. For there, his soul heard the silence, and in silence, God spoke. When he returned to the village, he told his experience. The elders smiled and understood. The tree had revealed itself again, not as a physical miracle, but as a spiritual presence. And that was all that mattered. Thus, the story was repeated generation after generation. The tree became alive wherever faith would find fertile soil. It was presence, it was metaphor, it was inner reality. With each new meeting, someone shared a report, and in all there was a constant. The shadow of the tree was always accompanied by peace. But peace did not mean absence of challenges. There were days of drought, days of pain, days of doubt. Still, those who had known the tree, or rather, who had been touched by their truth, were not easily dropped. They had learned to rest. Once Naomi was questioned by a visitor. "How can you keep faith when nothing changes around?" She answered with firm eyes, "Because we change inside. And when that happens, the world may continue the same, but we no longer face it alone." Another fragment of Eliabe's writings said, "The man who trusts in God does not fear the future. He walks with light steps, for he knows that even the stones in his way have purpose. He hears silence and learns. He closes his eyes and sees. He prays, and even if nothing changes outside, everything turns inside." These words became prayers in the mouth of the simple. When they didn't know what to say, they just recited the stretch with their hearts. Over the seasons, the fields flowered and dried, the faces changed, but the spirit of the tree remained. She was a reminder that the sacred is not distant, nor hidden in unreachable hills. He is where there is faith, where there is listening, where there is delivery. And with every new soul that was humbled, the tree flourished again. Right now, you may be feeling something like the characters in this story. A memory you never had, but recognizes, a peace that seems to come from an ancient place, as if heaven whisper his name forever. You may be facing difficult times, feeling fear, doubts, pressures, or loneliness. But even here, in this shared silence, there is a sacred shadow on you. The shadow of the one who never sleeps, who never leaves you. Imagine now, once again, the open field, the sky with the first stars emerging, the calm wind, and the tree. She is before you, your open branches, their soft leaves dancing in the wind, and the Spirit of God hangs over the place like a light breeze. You can approach, you can rest to your shadow, you can trust, without having to understand everything. Let this presence involve you now, not with explanations, but with welcome, not with answers, but with peace. We live in an era marked by speed. The messages arrive in seconds. The answers are required immediately. Emotions run over, and time, this divine gift, has become scarce. We often feel as if we are in the middle of a gale, seeking balance points in a world that constantly moves. In this daily hurry, it is common to feel that we lose something. A connection, a root, a silence that once calmed us. Some feel like a tree torn from the ground, floating between tasks, deadlines, and expectations, seeking a meaning, a shadow, a refuge. It is exactly in this context that the image of the sacred tree becomes so urgent and so necessary, because it is not just an ancient symbol, linked to past times and distant prophets. She is a spiritual invitation to the present day, a reminder that, even in the midst of concrete and technology, we can still stop, we can still hear, we can still trust. The sacred tree invites us to create refuge spaces in our daily lives, not only physical, but interiors. Places of prayer in the heart, places where the noise of the world does not enter, where only the voice of God is allowed to speak. And how do we do that? It begins with the slowdown of the soul, with the conscious decision to silence the excesses, to turn off the screens for a moment, to sit in silence and breathe. It seems too simple to be effective, but that's where the secret is. The Spirit speaks of breezes, not thunder. Think of your life now, in your routine, in their internal conflicts, in your fears. You may be feeling dry, like a solo that has not seen rain for a long time. But even in this state, there is hope. Because the God who made raining manna in the desert, who opened the sea to the Hebrews, also knows how to water his tired soul. The spirituality of the sacred tree is the spirituality of constancy, depth, the root that does not give up seeking the source. No matter how many times you feel fragile or dispersed, the important thing is to continue returning to the center, as one who returns to the tree, to rest to the shadow. In a society that values performance, God values the presence. In a world that charges perfection, God welcomes the imperfect with open arms. And when everything seems uncertain, remember Eliabe's silent prayer. Guide me, that I may walk only through your Spirit, not vanity. This is the prayer that we can still say, at the simplest moments, upon waking up, by touching the head on the pillow, when walking in the routine. We live in an era of growing anxiety. The heart often fires without reason. The mind is lost in repetitive thoughts. The body gets tired for no apparent reason. And all this is the scream of the soul, asking for break, asking for shadow, asking for root. It is at this point that God's word becomes our living water. When we read, "Come to me, all who are tired and oppressed, and I will relieve you." Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, we feel the echo of the sacred tree in this promise. Jesus, the Himself of God, calls us not to run anymore, but to rest in Him. The faith that Eliabe cultivated was not an escape from the world. It was a new way of being in the world, anchored, rooted. He teaches us that we can work, take care of the family, face difficulties, and yet maintain a living spirituality. Because the tree does not take us out of life, it offers us shelter inside it. Think now, when can you create shadow? Maybe it's in traffic, where you decide to pray instead of complaining. Maybe it's in the bath, where instead of thinking about problems, you thank you for another day. Perhaps it is in preparing coffee, transforming that daily gesture into a sacred act of attention and gratitude. The spirituality of the sacred tree is a spirituality of everyday life. It does not require large retreats or complex practices. It only requires presence and a decision. Today, even in chaos, I choose to trust. Confidence does not mean absence of pain. It means that the pain does not have the last word. Confidence does not mean that everything will work as we expect. It means that God is with us, even when we do not understand the way. Is it possible to trust the invisible? Yes. Faith is that. Well, faith is the certainty of things that are expected, and the conviction of facts that are not seen. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. You don't have to see the tree to believe it exists. You just need to rest in the shadow of the promise. Today, many people seek meaning in passing philosophies, in instant solutions, in empty promises. But the soul remains thirsty, because what the soul desires is not just relief. It is meaningful. It is connection with the eternal. It is an invisible home where you can rest without fear. And that is what the sacred tree represents. It is the memory that there is a spiritual place where we are whole, accepted, renewed. It is the symbol that even when everything crumbles, there is something that remains firm, and that something is God. When Jesus said, "I am the true vine, and you are the branches," John chapter 15 verse 5, he invited us to remain linked to him as branches that do not survive alone. He called us to communion, to permanence, the source. This same spirit is present in the narrative of the tree. We are not loose branches. We are part of something bigger. And the closer to the root, the more peace we find. So how to apply this truth to our life? First, creating intentional moments of silence, even if for 5 minutes. Sitting in silence is like watering the root of faith. Second, meditating on the Word. Choose a verse a day. Read, reread. Allow it to become a branch in your soul. Third, breathing. Yes, breathing. Conscious breathing brings us back to the present. And the present is the only place where God can be found. Room, delivering. The concerns, the fears, the bales. Say in a low voice, "Lord, I give it to you. Take care of me." And let the shadow of the tree surround your heart. And finally, remaining. Even when nothing changes, even when the answers do not come, permanence is silent faith. And it is in this permanence that the tree blooms. Right now, imagine that you are in the middle of your day. Noises around, notifications, commitments. Now close your eyes, breathe, and see yourself walking through a serene field. The sky begins to darken gently. The wind is calm, and in front of you, again, is the tree. She awaits you, as always waited. She does not charge, does not hurry, does not judge. Approach, sit down, leave yourself to the trunk. Close your eyes and say, "Even in the midst of chaos, I choose to trust," because trust is the root of true peace. And in this peace you can dwell, today, now that your mind has traveled the silent trails of this journey, and your soul has rested in the shadow of the sacred tree, I invite you to enter an even more intimate moment, a deep pause, a listening space, of connection, delivery. Close your eyes, accommodate wherever you are. Allow your body relax, from the tip of your feet to the top of your head. Loosen your shoulders, until any tension on the face. Breathe deeply. Inhale, counting up to 4, and expire slowly, counting up to 5. Once again, inspire, and exhale slowly. Feel the presence of God by filling this environment, as an invisible breath, like a silent hug. Imagine, with your serene mind, that you are again in that field. The light of dusk covers everything with a golden tone. The sky is clean. The air has a soft perfume, such as jasmine, myrrh, and fresh wind. In front of him, the sacred tree remains firm. She is beautiful, imposing, but does not scare. On the contrary, it welcomes. You walk to her. Each step is a decision to approach God, to trust more, to surrender. Upon arriving, the trunk touches the fingertips. It is hot and firm. You feel as if a loving energy went through your hands and slowly down to your heart. You sit down. The floor is firm. The shadow is fresh. There is peace. The leaves above you swing slightly with the wind, producing a soft sound, almost like a lullaby song sung by heavens. In this place, there is no hurry. There are no charges. There is no pain. There is only presence. At this moment, God is with you. You may not see it. You may not hear it the way the world expects, but you can feel it. Feel ... Feel his love involving his thoughts, warming his memories, healing the ancient wounds. Maybe you carry fears, fear of tomorrow, fear of loneliness, fear of failure. Deliver them now. As dried leaves taken by the wind, let these fears detach from you and disappear on the horizon. You may feel guilty, hurt, or resentment. You don't have to carry it. Breathe and give it all to God. Say with the heart, Lord, I trust you. He carries for me what I can no longer bear. Be in this silence for a moment. Breathe and feel relief. Now allow a prayer to be born in your heart. Not a decorated prayer, but a sigh of the soul. If you want, just say in thought, stay with me, Lord. Renew me. Fill me with your peace. Imagine that on your head there is light. A soft light that comes from the tree branches and surrounds you. This light touches every part of your being. He touches his memories, his decisions, his past, his future. And everything transforms. Not because your problems have disappeared, but because now you deliver them to the Creator's hands. Remember what is written in the Psalm 37. Deliver your way to the Lord. Trust him, and he will do so. Now is the time of delivery. Delivery of plans, concerns, relationships, confusing feelings. Deliver of what you don't control. Say very softly, inside you, I surrender, Lord, I trust, I rest. Now imagine Christ himself sitting beside him, in the shadow of the tree. He doesn't speak much, but look in your eyes with a love you never met before. It is a love that does not require you to change, to hurry, to correct yourself before you are loved. He simply loves. And in this love, you can rest. He touches his hand. You feel hot, a living presence. And he says, son, ... daughter ... I'm here. I've always been. I've never been away. You feel light, as if the weight of life had diminished, as if the dark nights now have a lit candle, as if you had finally returned home. Stay a few moments silent. Feel the breeze. Feel the shadow of the tree. Feel peace. Now, slowly, bring to mind a good memory. A moment when you felt safe, loved, embraced by life. Let this memory warm your heart. Allow this feeling to grow inside you. She is a seed of gratitude. Gratitude is fertile soil for faith. Thank you. Thank you for being here, for breathing, for being looking for. Thank you for the day, for the night, for the hope that is reborn. And if you feel like crying, cry. Tears, at this time, are prayers without words. They are salt that purifies the soul, and God collects each one carefully. Remember what Jesus said in John chapter 4. I leave you peace, my peace I give you. I will not give it as the world gives it. If you do not turn your heart, nor be affected, this peace does not depend on the circumstances. It comes from above. It is the result of the shadow of the sacred tree, which is also the constant presence of God. Now, let's pray together. Pray with me, in silence, sir. In the midst of the noise of this world, you called me to rest in you. Tonight, I leave my worries to your shadow. I deliver my dreams, my fears, my desires. May your spirit wrap me, as the wind surrounds the leaves. May your light warm me, as the sun warms the morning, and even in my dreams, I walk with you. Speak to me, Lord, even in silence. Keep my sleep, renew my soul, and that tomorrow I wake up in peace. Firm as tree planted by the waters. Amen. Now remain silent for a few more seconds. Let the music of the divine presence continue playing in your soul. When you are ready to sleep, know that you are not alone. The tree is inside you, and her shadow will accompany you wherever you go. If this message brought you peace, strengthened your faith, or helped your sleep, consider supporting our channel, subscribing, and commenting which passage touched your heart, or which story you want to hear next time. Now close your eyes and rest under the protection of the Most High.